Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, I want to begin with this map that shows us the extent of the cold air that we've experienced so far this fall. So when you look at this map, the numbers represent the coldest air that we've seen since October 1st. And what's amazing about this map is you see a lot of single digits and you see a lot of negative numbers. We also see that our cold air is extended clear to the Gulf Coast and to the East Coast. And when I think about this map and putting it into context, honestly, if you showed me this and didn't put a date on it, I would tell you that this is maybe what the end of our winter map would look like. So we've already seen temperatures across the United States that are more representative of midwinter than they are late fall. Now, hope you're watching this in full screen. Pause it, take a look at your local area, but it has been bitterly cold. Now, when I think about some of the things that are impacting harvest right now, I'm going to take you first to a map. This map is valid early in the morning on Sunday, so yesterday, looking at snow water equivalent. In other words, if we melted off the snow that we still got on the ground, what would it do in terms of kind of adding to very soggy soils here? So when you look here across some of our Great Lakes states, we do have in some locations, up to an inch, some locations even a little bit more of liquid equivalent in the snow that's still there. Now, we did bring in some warmer temperatures in the day on Sunday, which helped melt some of this off, but we're looking here at things that could be impacting harvest. Certainly one thing that we do know is that we are snow-free across a large section of the middle part of the United States right now, which is quite important to the harvest efforts that continue there. But over the weekend, we did have a little system that snuck through, bringing in some very light precipitation that went through the northern and western Corn Belt and eventually over into the eastern Corn Belt, just bringing in some annoying light rain showers for most folks. Outside of that, we had a cutoff low that kind of snuck here through parts of Mexico and Texas, and then eventually here over the weekend dumped quite a bit of rainfall that stretched from Alabama all the way up to the east coast here of North and South Carolina. Some locations picking up better than 3 inches of rainfall. But as we progress forward in this forecast, let's just make sure we understand that right now in our soil, when looking at soil moisture anomalies, parts of the north central plains stretching to the Great Lakes states, then down into parts of Missouri and Oklahoma, and then down into the lower Mississippi River Valley, we have a lot of locations that have between 2 and 6 inches of excess soil moisture at this point. So this has been some of the problem we've had with harvest. Things have been very muddy with that melting snow, the little bit of rain that we saw over the weekend. The timing of these events is such that we're really delaying our harvest efforts. Now, I wanted to know, is the soil at least frozen in some locations where we can get in on top of it and not worry about, getting stuck or digging very deep ruts? So this is now valid 7 a.m. this morning on Monday, looking at soil temperatures at 4 inches. And remember, I do a pretty abrupt color change here to show you where our soils are at least freezing temperature at 4 inches. I expect this map to fluctuate a lot over the coming days because the pattern we're about to get ourselves into is one that is going to bring some highly volatile temperatures. We're going to talk about that in the next few moments as well. So this is all about getting harvest done and what we're anticipating in terms of temperatures and precipitation. Now, certainly the pattern right now is quite active. Here are the major features we're going to be watching. Probably the largest of which is going to be this cutoff low that over the next few days will be emerging out of the southwest. As it moves into the central United States, it will be producing a pretty large low pressure system, and we got to talk about that. Out ahead of it, we have this deeper trough sitting here. And working on the edge of this little jet streak, we have a nor'easter that's kind of running up the northeast coast. And in the interior parts of the northeast, we're talking about a changeover from rain to sleet, freezing rain over to snow. Behind it, we need to be watching over the beginning here of the week on Monday and early Tuesday, a system that will be sneaking right here down in this northwest flow, but it'll be followed up by a trough that moves through the northwest and eventually produces more precipitation that'll squeak through parts of Montana and then into the north central plains. The big difference here, the blocked flow we had been seeing here in the Gulf of Alaska, that high over low pattern has changed. And this pattern does feature a lot of these little cutoff lows beneath the polar jet stream. And that's going to complicate the flow and make it quite difficult to predict its behavior in the coming days and weeks. So let's get to what we do know. I'm going to play out for you our high-resolution NAM model, and we can kind of look at some of the bigger features here. So let's get this started right here at 6 o'clock in the morning Central Time. First couple of features to watch as I play you through mid-morning. Our larger system going up the east coast, you can see the heavier precipitation along the coast and still some heavy precipitation, or some scattered precipitation, I should say, in the Carolinas. Meanwhile, as that system moves up the northeast by mid-afternoon, watch a system sneak through the Dakotas, remember on that northwest flow, and eventually be bringing in some precipitation, maybe get into a wintry mix here in northern parts of Minnesota as that slides through. Now in the afternoon and evening hours, here's the main things we're going to be watching. Getting to about 10 o'clock, notice here in the northeast, in the interior, the changeover from rain to sleet and freezing rain and eventually over to some snow. And we will be pushing some snow into parts of Wisconsin, maybe a wintry mix that comes into parts of eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, and eventually over into northern Illinois as we get into the early morning hours on Tuesday. So again, this is bringing more light precip into an area that saw some of it here in the day on Sunday as well. Now, as system 1 and 2 are finally moving off, our next two systems, that would be the wave that comes through the Pacific Northwest, maybe bringing some widely scattered showers to the Columbia Basin. Well, that one and the system to its south, this is the cutoff low, by Tuesday morning starts to show up in Southern California. And these two features are going to work together. So I'm going to stop this right here about 8 o'clock on Tuesday. At this point, our cutoff low is bringing widely scattered precipitation to the desert southwest, and to the north of it, our little shortwave is sneaking through parts of Montana, bringing in quite a broad shield of light snow. Now, as these two features work together, okay, this is now by 6 a.m. Wednesday morning, we are bringing in quite a bit of rainfall here to parts of California, packing up some snow in the Sierra Nevada, getting into the Intermountain West. And these two systems are going to work together to form another low that comes right through the midsection of the country toward the middle and end of this week. So let's take a look at what all of that looks like by next going here to a view of the GFS over the next 7 days and the European operational models in both situations. Now, you just stop and look at this. Okay, you can pause the video and get a closer look, but you see overall they're kind of both picking up on the same thing. Something's going on here in the next 7 days that we need to be talking about, and it appears to be originating here, bringing in some heavier precipitation to this area. The question is, what are the model differences, and are they significant enough that we really need to be discussing them? Because when I look out to week 2, GFS Ensemble, European Ensemble, I see major differences. Look at how much wetter the GFS is for the Pacific Northwest. Look at the pattern here in the GFS versus the wetter conditions here and here in the European model. Why are there such large differences, and what do these differences mean? Well, let's take a look at it by doing some model comparison. Now, before I even begin showing you, again, GFS on the left, European on the right, I want you to know that the run-to-run differences, we call that deprog DT, the change of prognosis over time, has been very high recently. I think the models are struggling with a few things. One, the change in the Pacific jet stream pattern. You remember I showed you those cutoff lows beneath the polar jet? I think that is a difficult pattern for the models to kind of hone in on the timing of those troughs as they interact with the mountains in the western United States. Two, we all know that there is this big polar vortex shift, and both models have picked up on its position and strength, but it's focusing all of that colder air into Russia, Siberia, that area. I'm going to show you in a few minutes the Mount-Julian Oscillation is going to collapse back toward null phase as the Indian Ocean dipole is strengthening, and we can further complicate this by showing you the Chukchi sea ice is slowly kind of filling in here north of Alaska. Okay, all of that even before I show the animation. So here we go. Let's pause this up to where we just got, which is Tuesday evening, getting into Wednesday morning. At this point, good model agreement, okay? We're watching the emergence of our big cutoff low coming into Southern California. And you can see the models kind of have the timing right on this, and certainly some warm air advection out ahead of that. So Wednesday, midday, strong southerly winds coming up the midsection of the country. Yep, it is going to be warmer than average on that. We can see that by Wednesday afternoon and evening, that first low is ejecting here into the Central Plains. We could get some snow that stretches from Wyoming clear up to parts of northern Minnesota, but definitely a lot of warm air out ahead of this, so the rain snow line's going to be pretty far to the north. Models are trying to place the low pressure system somewhere into eastern Nebraska by midnight on Wednesday, getting into Thursday morning, and it's going to take it straight toward Wisconsin by Thursday afternoon. Now, at this point, the models diverge in the speed of the next few systems, but they actually come back together by around day 10. Now, let me show what I'm talking about. So as we get out past Thursday afternoon, getting into Thursday evening, and then Friday morning, here's the big difference. Both models have a big ridge, but look at where the GFS has it versus the ECMWF. That is the difference. The slowing down of the pattern in the ECMWF allows this to happen. Ready? So this is Friday morning getting into Saturday morning. You see the differences here is that the GFS, more progressive with the pattern, shoves the next low out of the way, builds in high pressure very quickly. The European model, much slower, which allows another low pressure system to form here in the center part of the United States with enough cold air that may be bringing some snow on the backside of it in this region. Now at this particular point, when I try to diagnose which model has it right, again, the model-to-model differences plus the run-to-run differences are so large, it's a very difficult thing to do. I do think, though, given the initialization of the European model, it's got a better handle on this, though, which means I think I have higher confidence in seeing another low-pressure system at the end of this week for the start of the weekend, moving through the central and eastern Corn Belt, dragging its cold front all the way down here through the Cotton Belt at a much slower pace than the GFS says, which is over here on the left. Now, this is what's crazy. At this point, both models are bringing another system into the Pacific Northwest. They both, by the time we get out to next Sunday evening, have a dominant area of higher pressure sitting in this area. And as we kind of let the pattern evolve here, they both want to try to ruin Thanksgiving. And what I mean is, this is Tuesday morning, getting into Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening. This is now Wednesday morning, afternoon, and evening. Now, with the slower progression in the European model, it has a much larger system on a much deeper wave that comes in the midsection of the country. And this is a big snowmaker here and a big rainmaker to the south. My point is that the GFS also has a low somewhere sitting in the midsection of the country at this time, with the next big push of precip coming through the Pacific Northwest. So remember, we're looking at operational models out 10 days. You can't trust this, but it's an attempt to look to see what's consistent, what's not. Let me look at this another way for you. This is looking at the European Ensemble. Remember, it's run 51 separate times, and we've got this stopped here next Wednesday evening. I'm trying to see if there's any clustering of low pressure centers, and I can see that in this area we are getting some clustering. And this just tells me that all 51 different perturbations of the model are all trying to do, well, not all, but many are trying to produce a low pressure system somewhere in the central Corn Belt by the time we get out to next Wednesday. And all this means is, while uncertainty is high, we need to be watching this very carefully in the coming days to see if the model trend continues with producing this system. Certainly the upper levels of the atmosphere are supportive of it. This is the European Ensemble here. If I play this forward, there is our deep upper level trough that is coming into the southwest with the big wave break over the top of it, or to the north of it, I should say. But let me show you what happens by the time we get out to Friday. Remember, the European Ensemble, slower progression of this wave, kicks off this low here to end our week and begin our weekend right ahead of that trough that moves through the central Corn Belt. There it is. What's the difference? The GFS takes this wave and shoves it all the way off the East Coast by this time. That slows the progression of everything, including early next week the development of this deeper trough in the midsection of the country. You see, this much deeper trough in the European model is the culprit behind the low that develops Tuesday into Wednesday just before Thanksgiving right in through this area. And the GFS is not quite as deep with this. It's a much more progressive pattern again, because at this point the GFS is actually trying to blast in a bunch of cold air into Alaska, and the European model is not having any of it. So the European model is our colder model in the longer term. And let's now talk about those temperatures. You see, with that system that comes through on the European model, taking its track right in through here next week, it's cold enough on the backside we could have potential for some snow. So this is looking at the probability over the next 11 days at picking up at least 3 inches of snowfall. Now certainly here in the Northeast, yes, with the system that's coming through. With the colder air that will be in place, remember we showed it here in parts of the north central plains, but really getting it here into Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, of course. And with the colder air that does sneak in behind all of this, deeper in that trough, look, stretching from the Rocky Mountains in Montana all the way through Wyoming down into Colorado, definitely picking up quite a bit of snowfall, especially with that cutoff low that comes through. But it's this area in here that I see some model agreement on maybe a decent chance at picking up some snow just before Thanksgiving. We're going to watch this one carefully. Now those temperatures, I told you we're on a roller coaster ride. Monday's high temperature, departure from normal, cold east, warm west. As I play this forward, look at the differences. Ready? Here comes Tuesday into Wednesday. Now remember, with that next system that emerges on a Wednesday, all the warm air out ahead of it, 10 to 15 degrees above average will be the normal in the midsection of the country. But as it blasts through, the cold air always follows these things. So you just saw Thursday into Friday departure from normals, getting us into our weekend. So that's the roller coaster we're on, and that could melt some of that soil and some of the snow on top of it, causing some problems here with more mucky conditions. Now, getting out beyond that, take a look at this. This is the 6 to 10 day pattern from the GFS, and the same thing from the European. With the slower progression of the European, see where the cold is? With the faster progression of the GFS, it's much farther to the east. They at least agree that the Canadian prairies get to enjoy a bit of a warm up here compared to average. And day 11 through 15, this is where the biggest differences show up. You see, the European model, keeping that deeper trough in place, has the colder air here. What's going on with the GFS? It wants to bring the cold air into Alaska. And normally when we have really cold air in Alaska, we tend to have a flatter pattern across the U.S. and much less dramatic temperature anomalies. What's funny is both the models are actually in a good agreement over the polar vortex, but it's on the other side of the planet, and therefore it's at this particular stage less of a consequence in our cold temperature anomalies here across North America. Moral of the story, we're going to have to watch both models carefully throughout this entire week to see how things evolve here. And I hope this treatment that I've given you here of comparing the two at least provides some level of clarity. Right now, I am citing on the European model. I believe it had a better initialization when we think about the 0Z runs than the GFS did. So let's talk globally as we wrap this one up. The map over here on the left-hand side, August 1st through October 31st, looking at precipitation anomalies. In parts of New South Wales and Queensland, a lot of drought. And that drought primarily caused by the Indian Ocean dipole event we've been discussing. Over the last few days, though, look at the very wet conditions that have happened right here in this part of Queensland. And I want to show you what was going on there, because some of the storms that went right over here toward the coast were quite severe. In fact, this one produced a hail core with 74 dBz reflectivity in it. And you probably saw this video surface over the weekend. It went viral, showing you some of the hail that was coming out of some of these storms. So Australia has really been put through the ringer, and a lot of this caused by that powerful Indian Ocean dipole event. Well, speaking of that Indian Ocean dipole event, it is also changing the way our models are able to handle what's going on in South America. You can see here that the GFS ensemble on the left and the European on the right are also much different in the precipitation, especially in this corridor. With the GFS, is substantially wetter at this point. Now again, I'm going to have to side with the European because it's done a much better job in South America as of late at picking up on the precipitation patterns. Because with the MJO coming out of phase 6, 7, 8 over the last 10 days, getting back over into phase 1 and going into the null phase here, that's very consistent with this re-strengthening of the Indian Ocean dipole that we're going to be seeing here. So with those pieces kind of coming together, it at least lends some more support to me thinking that the European model has a better handle, especially on that South American precipitation. And again, just to show you that, here are some of these differences. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up right here. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you tune into all of our content this week as we watch this complicated pattern unfold. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.